Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Break Vape podcast, episode 34. I am your host, Tami Ernst. I just got back from the beautiful state of West Virginia and am heading to Spokane, Washington in a couple of days. Right now, I'm in my hometown of Houston, Texas, and it is hot, hot, hot. I hope everyone's summer is off to a great start. And if you're looking to quit vaping or know someone who is, go ahead and ask about coaching by sending an email to hello@breakvapes.com. That's hello@breakvapes with an s.com to get all of your questions answered, and I would love to see how I can help you. Today and next week, I've created a two-part series for you on time and how it relates to your vaping addiction. This week, we'll focus on your actual numbers and how to get them. And then next week, we will focus on how to make these numbers work for you when you're trying to quit. During this series, we're going to talk about time as it pertains to vaping. And we're going to do some things to help you really define how much time vaping is taking away from your life and what you can do to start making new time habits. I think that time is one of our most valuable commodities in the human experience. To some of us right now, time is more important and on our minds than others. This may be because of age or health issues or even having a near-death experience, etc. Now, my more mature listeners and my midlife listeners probably have a greater awareness around the concept of time. So, to my teens and my young adults, I just want to say that I see you. And I know that it can feel like you have all the time in the world ahead of you to quit vaping, but please don't wait, okay? Our beautiful human brains literally aren't finished developing until the time that we're about 23 years old. And so the damage that vaping is doing to your brain now is worse than to someone who picks it up later in life because your brain is still developing, which sounds so off, doesn't it? Because you get to make some pretty serious decisions before the age of 23. For instance, around 15 or 16, you'll be able to get a driver's license and probably your first job if you hadn't had one up to that point. And then at 18, you'll be able to legally buy tobacco, get married, join the military, and other things. And at 21 in the US, you'll be legally old enough to drink alcohol, and you'll still have 2 years to go until your brain is finished developing. So I just wanted to point out the science of your brain here, my young friends, in case you haven't heard it before. I'll do more episodes for you in the future on how you're being targeted by big tobacco on purpose and peer pressure and your precious mental health, which is just vaping is so bad for, and so much more. But for today, let's go back to the topic of time, because when we vape, whether we wind up getting sick from it or not, we are contributing a significant amount of time to this habit. I want everyone listening to think of the rest of the time that you have in your life as an investment, meaning that you will put in now what you will get more or less of in the future. If you put more vaping into your life now, you will shave time off of your future. But on the other hand, if you stop vaping now, you will gain more time in return. Imagine that all of the minutes you have left in this life can be kept in a value bank or a piggy bank. Now ask yourself, how much of that time are you taking out because of vaping? Well, let's do some easy math and find out, shall we? So when it's safe for you to do so, follow along and write down what we are about to do. So if you're driving, or maybe you're just listening to this passively for entertainment, or if you're distracted, that's all totally fine. Just finish listening to this episode and then come back to it again when you can focus and write. The way that we understand time in minutes is that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, and there are 24 hours in a day. So when you take 24 hours times 60 minutes, you'll find out that there are 1,440 minutes in a day. And if you continue to multiply that out, you'll find that the minutes in 1 calendar year equal 525,600. So that sounds like a lot of minutes, especially when you add them up to find out how long you've been vaping already and what your vaping window currently is. And we'll go into your vaping window more in a minute. But first, let's do a vaping time assessment. Try to remember how long you've been vaping as specifically as possible and add up all of that time in terms of days, weeks, months, years, and if you really want a mind-boggling number, convert it to minutes. So write down the days, weeks, months, years, minutes, etc. Take some time to think about it. How long have you been vaping? And write down your answers in those categories. Next, let's define your vaping window. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I started doing it for myself back when I was quitting, and it really helped me assess and plan around exactly how much time I spend vaping. Your vaping window is the number of hours in a day that you spend vaping. When I'm coaching, I'll actually completely work through this vaping window with my clients via Zoom and write it all out. So start out by writing down the number of hours per day that you do not vape, and then break down how often you do vape very specifically from there. For example, if you cannot vape for 10 hours out of the day, you would take 24 hours minus 10 hours, and that would leave you with 14 hours, which would be your vaping window. Then during this 14-hour vaping window, you would determine exactly how many hours and minutes you spend literally vaping. And we'll go over a couple of examples in a minute. The reason that we do this exercise is so that instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I can't go a whole day without vaping, you'll actually be able to see that you only have to plan on not vaping for a lot less time than you would have thought. One of my clients discovered that between sleeping, working, showering, hobby work, and meal prep, she was only left with 8 hours of the day where she was able to vape. So her vaping window was 8 hours, the time that she could vape. And then out of those 8 hours, we calculated every minute she was literally smoking, which turned out to be only about 2.5 hours. It's fascinating to see that almost everyone thinks that they pretty much vape all day and all night because maybe they don't have to hide it from anyone, so it's more accessible, or maybe they vape when they wake up at night. And most commonly, for most of us, it's just that our vapes never leave our hands. And every single time I do this exercise when I'm coaching, we find out that no one actually vapes all of the time, like we think that we do, by putting that very generalized label on it. So we're going to get rid of the generalization and instead get really specific about exactly what your unique vaping window is, your time window is. For example, let's use a made-up person, and we'll call this person James, because I just like that name. And his story looks something like this. James sleeps for 7 hours a night, and during that time, he gets up to use the restroom and spends a total of that waking up time vaping, and it adds up to be about 15 minutes. Then he gets up in the morning and spends another 15 minutes vaping, but not too much more than that because he's hiding it from his wife. But he gets to vape on the way to work, which is about an hour drive. Then at work, he has to hide vaping from clients or his boss, and his hands are busy a lot, so he can't vape as much during these times. But he can manage to do it while on break, at lunch, in the restroom, in his car, and even with other people on smoke breaks. So all in all, James gets very detailed about how often he vapes and finds out that he averages about 15 minutes per hour vaping in an 8-hour workday. Then he gets home, he's busy with a workout, family time, and projects around the house, where again, he only averages about 15 minutes vaping per hour. Later, he takes a shower, and he doesn't vape in there. He works on his side job, and he vapes a lot while doing that, but then he tucks his kids into bed, and he won't vape in front of them. So when he goes back and audits the time he has from getting home from work until he goes to sleep himself, he, again, averages about 15 minutes of vaping per hour. And I'm phrasing James's story like this on purpose, with all of this back and forth, because it is just realistic. There are times of the day where some of us are able to vape more than others. So for you to do this exercise accurately later, you'll need to be prepared to just get very curious and detailed by working through how many minutes you vape hour by hour, even if every hour is very different. So James has 24 hours in a day minus 7 hours of sleep, which leaves 17 hours left in the day. And out of those, 15 minutes per hour are spent vaping. An hour minus 15 minutes equals 45 minutes that he's not vaping per hour. So we take the time that he's not vaping to come up with his vaping window. Let's say that we did the math for how often James vapes in a 24-hour day, and it looks like this. And this is key, guys, so listen up. 11 hours are completely blocked out with times that he does not vape. 13 hours are times where he can vape, and this is his vaping window. And out of those 13 hours, because he spends on average 15 minutes per hour, we discover that he spends 3 hours and 15 minutes actively vaping per day for a grand total of 195 minutes per day. That's it. This is great news for James because we can plan exactly how to solve for not vaping for 3 hours and 15 minutes out of the day. Do you guys see the shift here? How doing this exercise can take you from feeling completely overwhelmed by vaping to seeing that it's just math. And instead of feeling like you're going to have to struggle all day, every day when you're quitting, you can actually have a time-based strategy. When you realize how much time vaping literally removes from your finite life, my friend, it is even more realistic to think of what would happen if you wound up really sick from vaping. Like many people out there, but hopefully not, you could wind up spending countless hours in the hospital or on a respirator, and in lots of ways, spending time medically working on trying to get more time back for yourself. Vaping is like throwing your life into a time vortex where you make your minutes meaningless. You are worth more than all of that wasted time. The net worth of your time is precious, and what you do with your time can contribute so much good to the world when we shift together from an addiction and consumption experience to a productive and creative purpose. Why would you give one more second of your beautiful life to vaping? Please don't do it. You don't have to feel like you've been taken over by vaping. You just have to understand how to identify and plan around the time that you currently spend vaping. For visualization purposes, let's take James for example again, and we'll just do a little bit more math. So 3 hours and 15 minutes per day times 365 days a year equals over 1,187 hours per year, which means our friend James over here is spending 12.5% of his time per year vaping. It might be mind-blowing, but again, it's just math. James is spending 12.5% of his life per year on vaping. Now it's your turn. Fun, right? You need to know your numbers though, and here is how to get them. Step 1, add up how long you've been vaping. Remember, we did it in days, weeks, months, years. Add up how long you've been vaping, write it down. Step 2, audit the time that you spend on vaping and calculate your vaping time window. How many hours do you not vape? The hours left over are your vaping window. Write it down. Step 3, out of your vaping time window, calculate out how much time you are actively spending on vaping per day, literally smoking. Write down this number and have it ready for next week. Make sure you get all of this information down for yourselves, guys, okay? It is so important. Next week in Taking Back Your Time Part 2, I'll show you how to process your numbers and how to make your thoughts around those numbers work for you to help you quit for good. As always, if you are ready to reach out about coaching, send an email to hello@breakvapes.com. That's hello@breakvapes with an S.com. And let's chat and get all of your questions answered so you know exactly how I can help you quit for good. Make the most of your precious time this week, my friends, and I will see you for How to Take Back Your Time Part 2 next week. Bye for now.